Well, it's Youth Development Week this week, and pleased to say Bryan Ball's taken time out of his schedule to join us. Bryan, firstly, thanks for your time.
No problem.
This week gives us as a club a chance to highlight what's going on with the academy and youth football in general. Firstly, I know there's lots of people behind the scenes that make a lot of things happen, and not many fans get the opportunity to see them day to day. I mean, just talk us through how many people are in the academy working.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And a lot of those staff are part-time, of course, so they have other jobs and have to work unsociable hours, evenings, Sundays, Saturdays. We're very grateful for both their dedication and their expertise. Within the academy, we have probably two main components. We have what I would term the main academy, which is the registered players who are both in the youth team, the full-time apprentices, and the part-time players are still at school from 9s to 16s, and there are about 120 of those players in the programme at any one time, and they're looked after by about 20 staff. As I say, some of those are part-time, some of those are full-time, but in addition to that, there are also a number of people who are helping all the way through the process. That includes parents, who often get a bad press, football parents. I have to say that, in my time working with young players, that almost without exception, the parents are really supportive. They just want the best for their young man generally. Although, of course, with 120 players and 120 sets of parents, there's always the odd one or two that maybe show that support in ways we would perhaps wish that they didn't. But in general, they're absolutely brilliant in terms of the staff. Amazing group of people, almost to a man or a woman. They're very dedicated, very skilled, and we just wouldn't be where we were without their abilities.
Absolutely, and we've had some great success stories recently, haven't we? Most notably, I guess, with Joe Bodé and Sam Gale. Harry Webster has been in the first team this season as well. How satisfying is it from a completely selfish point of view, I guess, to see these players in the first team, although no doubt your focus, I know you very well, is trying to find the next one.
Yeah, I had that conversation last week. Obviously, it's brilliant when a young player makes their debut, and we get just as much pleasure as the fans do, and probably a little bit more when they first make their debut. But very quickly, that focus does have to move on to who comes next. It is a sort of a never-ending process that we bring them in at sort of one end of the programme at sometimes 8 years old. And then 18, 19, 20, like Harry, Sam and Joe are, they're in at the top end of the programme, at the really busy end, which is obviously the bit that's visible to people. I think it's a little bit like an iceberg, really, that, the tip of the iceberg is Sam and Joe and Harry, but there's, a huge amount below that. And we're really fortunate that we've got some really talented individuals within our programme. All the way down through the programme, but particularly in the upper 4 or 5 years. And it's exciting times, both for the players and I think for the staff who are working with them.
Not forgetting Alex Giles, of course, who played against Swansea in the Cup last year, of course.
Yes, of course. People always remember the ones who are in at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we won't forget Alex, who's a great lad as well.
Yeah, and Harry Baldock, of course, who's also played in the first team, and Stan Sargent.
And Stan, of course, in the trophy, didn't he?
So we've had a few. Stan Skipper played in there as well.
Yeah.
And we've got other young men who haven't quite come to the fore yet, but I'm pretty sure that they will.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, Bryan, you've worked here a long time. I won't say how long, but probably one of the longest serving members of staff at Priestfield Stadium, and probably best placed to kind of tell us how your role, how you've set up an academies have changed, not just here at Gillingham, but across the board. What the main challenges that you and others face in nurturing players all the way from grassroots all the way to the first team. And an example of that I've just come up with is Sam Gale, because he wasn't quite grassroots, but he's certainly from 12, 13 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, all the young men have a different journey, and there's not really a right and wrong, but clearly some people like Alex, for example, that you mentioned, came to us as a 9-year-old, Harry at 12 and Sam at 13, Joe at 15. So they all can arrive at different times, and I think the first challenge is getting them in the building, and the competition for good young players, even as young as that 7 and 8, is intense. but that applies all the way through. So that competition can come in many shapes and forms. Obviously there are Category 1 academies, which are typically Premier League clubs, who are also looking at our players when they play for us, looking whether they can bring them into their programme. And while we're doing very similar things out in grassroots football, having got them in the programme, we need to develop them. And I think one of the keys, and talk about the iceberg, but so much of the work that we do is with those players that don't quite get to first team level here, or anywhere else at that matter at a professional level. But you only have to go to a game in semi-professional football in the county, and you'll find 1, 2, 3, 4 players that at some stage have been in our programme.
Yep.
And for me they're still success stories. The biggest success stories and what everybody looks for are obviously the ones that do go out and play at Priestfield on a regular basis, and they're the ones ultimately we do get judged upon. But there is so much good work that goes on for all the players, irrespective of what level they get at. We shouldn't think that they're not a success, because absolutely they are. The dedication that they and their parents put in, and hopefully the enjoyment they have of being part of the programme is a huge part in their development. And the nicest stories, strangely enough, are the ones who perhaps don't quite get to the levels of Sam and Joe. And when they come back, and the parents, after a disappointment, will pick up a phone and say, "Thank you so much for what you and the staff have done, because you've turned them into a better young man." And to be honest, if you offer me one or the other, that's a tough choice to make.
For those who are perhaps not aware of the overall structure, I'm talking kind of development centres and age groups up to the apprentices, and of course they're going on to the first team. Just talk us through the structure. How often does each group train? Where do they train? And ultimately, when do younger age groups play their fixtures?
Okay. So if I talk about the Advanced Centre and the Development Centres first, they're geographically based centres. We have 6 development centres and an Advanced Centre. They're pay and play. They're huge tools for us in terms of recruitment, but also they're really important for us because they are a bridge to the community, albeit that it's primarily run for a recruitment process, but they run off the same curriculum as the academy boys who are registered, albeit that they train only once a week, and they do have a games programme of sorts, but they're also registered for their grassroots clubs wherever they play their football, and they're really important to us. And we have around 400 boys in that part of the programme at any one time, and long may that continue, because the vast majority of our younger players, under 9s, under 10s, under 11s, who become registered, the vast majority of them come through that part of the process, as do ones who are slightly older as well. So it's a really important strand to what we do and how we recruit young players, which is a critical part of the equation, as I've already mentioned. I think the other part, which probably is more recognisable to people, is the main programme, which is split into 2 primarily. That's a 9s to 16s programme, which is for boys who are still at school. Category 3 academy, so therefore with us they train twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings at the brilliant facilities at the University of Kent at Canterbury. They play their games for the 9s to 14s on a Sunday morning, split odds and evens. The 9s, 11s, 13s will be at home, while the 10s, 12s, 14s are away, and vice versa, against other Category 3 clubs from around the region, and occasionally Category 2 and Category 1 clubs when the fixtures fall in the right kind of way. And those games are all on the Sunday morning. And then we've got the 15-16s group. They play their games on a Saturday, same training regime, albeit they're under 16s. Just school holidays will come in and train with our under 18s group at Beecham's Cross. But they play their games on a Saturday morning at the same time as a youth team, same venue as a youth team. So we would either play 16s and 18s games at home or 16s and 18s games away against Category 3 opposition. But likewise, we've played with our under 18s, for example, this season, Manchester United, Liverpool, with our under 16s, Chelsea. So there's a range of different kinds of fixtures that we try and organise away from the normal regime that they follow. The youth team train at the same time and same place as the first team, so they will train typically Monday, Tuesday, education on a Wednesday for the apprentices, and then Thursday and Friday, and then, as I say, their games will be on Saturday morning.
Lovely. Just finally, Joe Dunn has fairly recently joined us as a youth team manager. Of course, he was a player here. Talk us through the kind of short-term goals you and the whole department have with regards to maybe new apprentices that are coming through, and I guess long-term goals, which you probably already touched on, involves bringing more young players into that first team environment, or at least for consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think firstly what I'd say is Joe's a brilliant appointment for us. I mean, I've known him a long, long time. In fact, we were just talking about games that, we had against Colchester when he was youth team manager there in 2005, I think it was, which gives you a bit of a clue as to how long that I've been here.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention the year, but you've already done it, so that's fine.
I know I was here 5 years before that, so I've totally spilled the beans now. But yeah, Joe's a brilliant appointment for us. And part of the reason he's a brilliant appointment for us is got that first team background. And he brings in that first team lens of looking at a player, that first team intensity in training, so that he tries to make the sessions as a first team session as possible, because one of the differences when a young player goes across and trains with the first team is the physicality and the intensity of the training session. So it's something that I was really pleased when we got him in, that I think we've short-circuited that a little bit, so it's a bit more comfortable for young players when they go over for the first, second, third time. But in terms of the short term and the long term, I think by the time they've got to under 17s, which is the first year of their apprenticeship, you're sort of looking to develop them in a way that's still concentrating on their individual development, but doing it more in terms of a team structure. And while, from my personal perspective, I don't really mind whether the youth team win, lose or draw, as long as I can see development in the individuals. And part of that is seeing development as a group as well. So, because when they go into the first team, the only thing that will count is winning. So we have to strike that balance right, that the players have to understand, it's about development, but they also have to understand it's about winning as well, because that's the environment they're trying to get themselves into. When we sort of look back a little bit below that, 9s to 16, for me it's all about development. And I'm sort of a strange kind of individual that can come away from a game of football having lost it really happy, because I'm seeing development in either an individual or a number of individuals or within a group, and I can come away from winning a game with the opposite lens on and pretty unhappy because we may have won a game of football, and that's genuinely important. Even with the under 9s, it's important to win games of football to the players, but it has to be, from my perspective, it has to be about what improvements we're seeing on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And I think with Joe, he gets that balance spot on, so it's really, really helpful. And I think I think we'll see the proof in the pudding over the next year or two. And don't get me wrong, that's not just because of Joe, because there's a lot of work gone into some of those young men prior to him joining the football club, and prior to them becoming apprentices. So there's a lot of people in that journey, but he really is top draw.
And just finally, Bryan, you did mention that you started here working in 2000. How has your role evolved? I mean, 25 years is a long time in any job, but just talk us through the challenges that you faced then compared to what they are now, and I suppose the evolvement of the academy and youth football in general.
Okay. I mean, firstly, what I'd say is the world's a very different place in general. Social media and the internet, and obviously, just how people have changed over that period of time. And I think a lot of the challenges are around some of those aspects, but also there's a lot more compliance with rules and regulations around health and safety, around safeguarding, around the well-being of young men, and quite rightly so. But the rule book that we now have to follow compared to the rule book that we had to follow back in 2000 is much, much bigger, much more complex, and we do spend quite a lot of time on tasks that probably to people in the outside world, they probably wouldn't put that in, together with youth development. But it's a very important component part of our role. I think what's also changed is two things really. I think one, from a playing point of view, the level of player that not just ourselves but that we see in all academies, the technical ability of the players now is completely different and completely better than it was 25 years ago, and that's to do partly with the stimulus that is outside, such as television and such as social media, and the ability to see different aspects, and it goes hand in hand with the improvement in youth coaching courses that were just non-existent 25 years ago. If you did a coaching badge, it was about coaching adults, and you were just expected to use that to coach an 8-9-year-old, which is clearly ludicrous now. But back 25 years ago, nobody knew really any different, certainly in this country. So I think, you know, those are the two major changes, are the quality of the coaching, and I don't just include Gillingham or other EFL clubs in that. I include the numerous soccer schools that are out there that are, you know, generally really well run, and you know, they sometimes call themselves academies, but you know, normally the coaches are pretty well qualified, and you know, they produce technically very accomplished players, which makes life a lot easier for us when they come into us. And then you know, those coaching awards, the youth coaching awards, which are, you know, really important in terms of helping us develop young players, are absolutely critical to that success. They're the biggest changes in those 25 years.
Lovely. Well, Bryan, thank you for that. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
No worries.